We've got an update for you in this bizarre case of a former Georgia beauty queen accused of plotting her wealthy husband's murder with her lover in the Bahamas. Now we're learning new details about alleged incidents with her latest boyfriend that apparently happened while she was out on bail and back in the United States. Stick with me, it's a wild ride. We're going to get into it right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Lindsay Shiver, that is a name that if you've been following us here on Sidebar, you know quite well. She is once again back in the headlines, and this time it's an update on a man that she was allegedly seeing in Alabama while she was out on bail from the Bahamas. Very complicated, lot going on. We've covered Shiver, her case, several times here on Sidebar. She is the one-time National Peanut Festival pageant contestant. But not just that, she's also accused of allegedly asking her lover in the Bahamas to kill her estranged husband, insurance executive and former Auburn University football player Robert Shiver. She, her reported lover Terrence Bethel, and a third man, Farron Newbold Jr., face murder for hire charges in the island's court system. And we're going to talk a little bit more in a moment about Shiver's charges and the latest on the investigation and the court case in a minute. But first, I want to talk about what's happening here. I want to talk about the latest U.S. court update. And to do that, I want to bring in criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Michael Brown. Michael, thanks so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it. Have you been following this bizarre case? Because every time we talk about it, there's always a new twist.
Twists and turns, Jess. Thanks for having me on. This is a case you can't write a better script. I mean, there's so much going on, and obviously the new developments are quite interesting as well. I think it's going to be a really interesting trial in the Bahamas. And obviously, if she's incarcerated in that jurisdiction, well, there goes by the wayside the case here against her, I guess, ex-boyfriend.
Let's explore that a little bit. I'm glad you mentioned it. So when Shiver was granted bond by a Bahamian judge and allowed to return to the U.S., she was required to live with her parents out in Alabama. But she reportedly started dating a man named Dorsey Ryan Love, who lived in the small town of Ashford. This is outside of Dothan. Now, last summer, Shiver filed a protection order against the 35-year-old Mr. Love, claiming that he choked her during a domestic incident. Now, Love was arrested. He was charged with strangulation. She claims that Love threw her onto a bed, tried to choke her, suffocated her with a pillow at a home in Dothan. And she also claims that he abused her on an earlier trip to Florida, but says she didn't report that to police. Now, she wrote or claimed in a protection order request, "He threatened to kill me." Last week, Love was officially indicted and entered a not guilty plea. And we have found multiple mugshots out there for Love, but we haven't been able to independently verify the exact charges that he's faced in the past or any convictions. But Michael, let me first start here. Why do you think it took so long for him to be indicted? He was arrested last July.
You know, oftentimes a prosecutor, before they rush the case into a grand jury, they want to evaluate the merits of the case, especially when you have the person who's making the allegation is currently charged with a murder conspiracy charge. That takes a lot of thought because you indict this person and that's your primary witness. Well, now this is who you have to go with. So you got to be careful with what you do. So I'm sure there was a lot of back and forth in that particular prosecutor's office to determine if they're going to go forward with the grand jury presentation.
In domestic violence cases, if there's no documentation, right, there's no hospital report, there's no forensic material to establish that there was an attack. Let's say there's not text message history between the two communicating about what happened. If it's only her word against his word, or maybe vice versa, depending upon the case, are those successful prosecutions? Can you prosecute somebody purely based on the account of another?
Yeah, the he said, she said cases are very difficult to prove. Without corroborating evidence, they become very difficult. You want that forensic evidence. You want the eyewitnesses. You want some medical testimony or evidence. You want an admission, you know, whether it's a written or oral admission. You want these other things to corroborate the allegations. They're very difficult to prove, but for that.
You mentioned this before. I want to explore it. If this domestic violence case ends up going to trial, and Shiver is down in the Bahamas for her own legal trouble, because I can't imagine. First, let's start here. You know, we talk all the time about federal and state cases in the United States working out who goes first. How does it work? I mean, I don't think there's going to be coordination between the Bahamas and Alabama, right? Have you seen somebody who would face charges both abroad but be involved in another case that's in the United States? I don't know how that would work in terms of scheduling. Let's first start there.
Well, I think I agree with you, and I don't think there will be much coordination, but certainly the authorities in the United States, in whatever state it was in, are going to yield to the Bahamas, I think, for the sole reason that it's a much more serious charge. So, and I'm not minimizing domestic violence, but the allegation here in the United States pales in comparison if you look at the allegation of she's trying to murder and kill her husband.
By the way, I got to ask something totally left field here, but have you ever left a meeting and thought, what did we just talk about for the last 30 minutes? Or maybe you're in a position where you want to take notes, but you really can't. Well, I've been there a lot of times. There is a solution. It's called Claude Notepen. This is an incredible tool that leverages AI to boost your productivity, and you can wear it in all different kinds of ways. Like right now I have it on my wrist. You can also put it on your lapel. You can put it on during meetings, interviews, anytime you need to capture everything without lifting a finger. That's what you use. It transcribes in 112 languages. It tags speakers automatically, and it summarizes everything into one clean template in seconds. And by the way, Notepen doesn't just record, it also serves as a note taker, allowing you to take notes anywhere, anytime, hands-free. It extracts insights, it boosts your efficiency, it saves time, and most importantly, allows you to stay engaged in the conversation. So right now, if you're interested, you can get 10% off. Just click the link below or scan the QR code on screen. If you are serious about leveling up, start here. So how does this work, example? So let's say she goes to trial in the Bahamas and she gets locked up, she gets convicted. Is this case done with out in the States, this domestic violence case?
I would expect so for a couple of reasons. I think it's going to be very difficult to have her produced here in the United States. And from a justice standpoint, if she's convicted of trying to kill her husband, again, not that if it's true, what happened here in the United States is still significant. It pales in comparison to what we have in the Bahamas. And I don't think they're going to worry about it.
Let's say this domestic violence or alleged domestic violence case happens first, and she testifies, so she hasn't gone to trial yet in the Bahamas. Would her murder for hire allegations come into the Love case? Would it only come in if she takes the stand? How would it work?
Yeah, I think, well, let's remember, her credibility is always an issue as a witness on the witness stand. So if I'm the defense attorney, I certainly would get into those allegations and what's alleged. It's hard for her to plead the fifth because she's now exposed herself. She's taken the stand. She's subjecting herself to cross-examination. So I don't think her attorney would allow her to testify on that domestic violence case while the case in the Bahamas is pending. It would be fatal.
But you wouldn't have a case without her, though, right? Man,
correct.
Again, going back to the initial premise, unless they have more evidence that I'm just not aware of, if it's really based on her account of what happened to her, I feel like the prosecution needs her to testify. But there's the concern, the minute she gets up there, now this jury's going to know, if they don't know already about her legal troubles, they're going to know what happened and what's going on in the Bahamas.
Correct. So the prosecution can hope for some type of plea deal, but ultimately, at the end of the day, if that case in the Bahamas is still pending, I, as her attorney, would advise her 100%, you are not taking the stand because you are subjecting yourself to cross-examination.
Right. Okay, so Michael, now let's talk a little bit more about this crazy Bahamas case, this alleged murder for hire plot involving Shiver and her apparent lover, maybe former lover, Terrence Bethel. So back in July of 2023, police in Thomasville, Georgia, which is not far from the Florida line, responded to Robert and Lindsay's multi-million-dollar home after reports of some kind of domestic incident. Now, Shiver told police that they were going through a contentious divorce, and Robert had shoved her out of the way during an argument over their private jet. Gotta say, never had an argument quite like that one before, but that's a separate issue. Anyway, Robert and the couple's 3 sons, they were headed down to the Bahamas, apparently. And this is a place where they spend a lot of time, according to posts on social media. Turns out, Shiver may have had another reason to go to the islands besides just sand and sun. The man that she was purportedly having an affair with, Bethel, was down there. And Robert just wasn't having it.
The last 3 weeks, maybe longer, she's had her couple's trip planned with her boyfriend to go to Key West.
Okay, but she just said you're going.
That was to Key West.
But they don't.
I'm taking my kids, my 3 boys, to the Bahamas this morning.
Our kids.
Our kids. Yesterday, she sent a message saying that she's going to change her plans and now get on the airplane with me and the kids to go to the Bahamas.
But I am too,
And
by
when
the
we
way.
land, she's going to go boyfriend
elsewhere.
and me and the kids are going to our house. And I told her I'm not supporting that. And you're not getting on the airplane. That can mess with the kids' heads. And it's just something we're not going to do.
In situations like this, the best thing that we always recommend is y'all separate. Don't just separate from each other. You don't need to be going on vacation together if you file for divorce and it's obviously a volatile situation.
Now, no charges were filed over that incident in Georgia, but according to Bahamian authorities, on this same day, Lindsay and her boyfriend plotted to kill Robert. According to People magazine, when Robert got down to the Bahamas, he was seen arm in arm with another woman. Someone took photos, sent them to Shiver, according to People, and that is when she forwarded those pictures on to Bethel and Newbold. Terrence Bethel was a bartender in the Bahamas at a seaside bar called Grabbers. Authorities named him as an alleged co-conspirator. Bethel and Shiver reportedly recruited another man, Farron Newbold Jr., to carry out the hit. He's also been charged by Bahamian police. Authorities there say they uncovered this plot when they suspected Bethel might have been stealing money from the bar, and they went through his phone. And when they connected Shiver to Bethel, they went through her phone and found photos and texts allegedly showing that she had ordered this hit. During an interview with police, Shiver reportedly told them that she had told Bethel she wanted Robert dead, but then said she was just venting and never actually planned to hurt him. Shiver was arrested, jailed in Nassau in July of 2023, but got out on $100,000 bail. She had to wear an ankle monitor, wasn't allowed to leave the island. Michael, let me just stop there. If she was charged with a murder for hire crime, solicitation to commit murder, conspiracy to commit murder, I don't know if there's a specific murder for hire statute in individual states, but if she was facing those charges here, you think she would be granted cash bail?
It depends on the jurisdiction.
Sure.
It's a hard one, but and as a defense attorney, you would argue, what's the proof that you have? And that probably would lead to your next question. What type of proof did I have? This simple act of having a text message kill him, and I don't want to minimize it, but that could be a reaction, just an emotional reaction to seeing that her estranged husband is having an affair. That in and of itself is very far from proving that case beyond a reasonable doubt. So I don't know what other evidence there is. Now, there is an ankle monitor. They're monitoring her, I think, via GPS, and that's significant to know her whereabouts. But if you're conspiring, if it's a strong case and you're conspiring to kill somebody, I don't think you would be granted bail. And if you were, it would be much more significant bail.
I'm glad you mentioned that because, look, I am no expert in Bahamian law. Despite the many rumors out there, I am not. And I have to tell you, I don't know if this is a strong case. I don't know all the evidence that the prosecution has. I think some of these cases can be quite difficult to prosecute because how do you get in someone's mind? What did they intend? Unless you can show there's a payment of funds, there's a plot, overt acts were taken in furtherance of that plot to kill. Maybe they have more of it. And when you have multiple players, you also wonder, is somebody going to say, they took me too literally, they did something on their own, I didn't know they were doing this? This can be a complicated case to prosecute, right?
Yes. Just remember, so you hit the nail on the head. You have the conspiracy is the agreement to commit the act, but you also have to have the overt acts. You have to have something in furtherance of that agreement. So simply saying it never suffices, at least not here in New York State. You got to show overt acts. Typically, you'll have some type of overt act, you'll have some discussions, and then you'll have the undercover fall into place, and then they'll be part of that conspiracy, and bingo, they'll have a recorded conversation, they'll have video, game over. When you don't have that, and I know nothing about the Bahamian case, you would hope and expect that one of the co-defendants is going to end up flipping, and that's going to kind of fill in the gaps for the prosecution.
No, absolutely. 100%. That's something that they would be looking for. But, it's interesting. First of all, I really feel bad for the children in this case. And I feel bad also for Robert, too, the alleged victim in this case, to think about what they're going through with all this news. But it does make me wonder, will she testify? Would she take the stand? And again, I don't know exactly how it works in Bahamian courts. But the reason I say that is, does she want to tell her side of the story? Why? Because that December, the judge in the Bahamas agreed that Shiver could return to the United States to see her children live with her parents in Alabama. She still had to wear the ankle monitor. She couldn't travel to Georgia, where Robert and the boys live. Okay. But less than a year later, in October of 2024, the judge ordered her back to the Bahamas, back to jail, because authorities say she broke the conditions of her bond by not only traveling away from her mother's home for extended periods of time, but get this, she and Bethel also spoke with GMA, Good Morning America, in Inside Edition, despite being told not to comment on the case. During that interview with GMA, Bethel apparently said, "Nobody ever wanted him dead. I'm definitely not guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, and Farron's not guilty of being a hired hitman. It's time to let the world know we're innocent." And during the GMA segment, Shiver reportedly did not speak about the case. One of her attorneys told the judge she, quote, merely appeared on film. The Daily Mail reports that Shiver, Bethel blame ABC for reneging on an agreement not to air any footage until after their conspiracy to murder trial was over. And since then, she's once again been granted bond, the conditions that she not talk about the case, wear the GPS monitor. Now, Michael, what she said, what she didn't say, bottom line, she wouldn't be the first high-profile defendant to do a media interview or talk to the media during the pendency of an investigation or trial.
Happens all the time. Karen Reed's a perfect example. And as a defense attorney, we urge our clients, keep your mouth shut. There's no good that comes from you speaking to the press and getting that cross-examination in the press and having them ask questions, because anything can be used against you. It's a bad move. You are not going to persuade, ultimately, at the end of the day, the 12 people that are going to be sitting in the box in judgment of you. It's not going to happen, because if they're so familiar with this case, they would be precluded from sitting as a fair and impartial juror. So there is no good, but again, people feel the need to go out there and publicize and get that out to the press. Very hard as a defense attorney.
I would agree with you. From a legal point of view, I would agree with you. I would say the only time that it might be beneficial is if you're dealing with a criminal case where the actual consequences maybe are not so severe, like maybe you're talking minimal prison time, probation, something like that, but you're also a public figure and you're trying to battle this in the court of public opinion. And it's very important for you to reverse the narrative in that way, on a PR front. I mean, it's totally different, not a criminal case, but the Blake Lively litigation, so much of it's being litigated before the actual trial. That's the only time I would maybe wonder whether or not, because so much has been said about her, but she's not necessarily a public figure here, Lindsay Shiver, but it does make me wonder, is that an exception?
And my answer is no. And here's why. If you have a good lawyer, your good lawyer can put that out to the media and get those points across. And what I say isn't coming in as evidence. What you say as a defendant is game. And listen, I don't care how good you are. You can be an actor like Blake Lively. You can be experienced talking to the press. But now you're the subject, and you're the subject of criminal allegations. And as we know, every little bit of what you say can be used against you. And there's no redos. You've said it, they have it, and the prosecution can cross-examine you with it. So yes, I agree, Jess, with the thought of getting it out there and in public opinion. But let your really good attorney do that for you. That's always my belief.
Now, her murder trial, or conspiracy to commit murder trial, has been delayed multiple times. For now, it's scheduled to begin in August. I go back to my question, if she is vocalizing this and she is speaking to the media, maybe not necessarily about the case, do you think there's an advantage for her to take the stand? I mean, you and I both know that to take the stand, incredibly risky. I see it mostly successful, potentially successful in self-defense cases where it's good for the jury or the judge to know why you felt it was necessary to use reasonable force. The Leon Jacob case out in Texas, and anybody who wants to look at it can look at that one. It was a murder for hire case. He took the stand. Didn't work for him. He was convicted. Do you think there's ever an advantage, maybe in a case like this, for her to take the stand and explain her side of the story?
There is, and that's a game day decision. That's something that I think after the prosecution puts their case up, the defendant and the defense attorney will make that call. You never want to commit to that. In regards just to, is there advantage? Sure is, because now the defendant can get up on the stand if they present themselves well, if they can personalize themselves, if they can evoke sympathy. Those are all great things that they can get as a result of testifying. But as you mentioned, you also subject yourself to cross-examination, and you can open up many doors that are not going to go well for you. So you really got to be prepared, and you got to be rehearsed to some extent so that you present what you want to the best of your ability.
Michael Brown, we will keep a very careful eye on this case and see how it progresses. I'm also interested as an attorney myself just to learn a little bit more about Bahamian law as this goes forward. So we'll see. But thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jess. Take care.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.